May I continue? The millionaire with a hardened heart begged the nurse for something unbelievable. Hello, everyone. Before we begin, if these stories bring you a little peace, a quiet tear, or a smile that stays until midnight, please take a moment to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It's free and only takes a second of your time, but it helps this little channel grow so we can keep sharing moments that remind us what love is truly about. And tell us where you're watching from your words. Make this world feel a little warmer, a little kinder. Thank you for being here. Some hearts stop beating long before they stop breathing. Let us return to our main character. Alexander Hayes had everything the world desired: money that moved markets, a mind that built empires, a life that looked like perfection. Yet nothing in his world felt alive anymore. 3 years ago, a hospital call ended everything that mattered. His wife, his calm, his anchor never came out of surgery. The news fractured him quietly, leaving no wound that could be stitched. He never cried. He worked. He built higher, faster, stronger, hoping success would drown the sound of the heart monitor that once flatlined. But guilt doesn't fade with noise. It grows in silence. He blamed himself for being in another city that night. He blamed the surgeons for not saving her. He blamed the world for continuing to turn as if she'd never existed. Now, at 42, his body had betrayed him too. The diagnosis was not fatal, but it was enough to place him back, in the one place he swore he'd never return: the hospital. The same sterile smell, the same white corridors, the same hum that once swallowed his life. When he entered the room, he didn't look at anyone. He just said, "No flowers, no visitors, no noise." Minutes later, the door opened again. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes," a soft voice said. "I'm Emma Reed. I'll be taking care of you." His eyes flickered toward her badge, toward that name, Reed. It hit him like a pulse of static, the same name from the surgical team report 3 years ago. The nurse who signed off on the final minutes. His jaw tightened. The air thickened around him, but he said nothing. Just another ghost, he thought. Another reminder the world refused to bury. She, of course, had no idea who he was beyond the patient file in her hands. He turned his face away. "Just do your job." She nodded quietly. "That's the plan." There was something about her tone, no apology, no fear, just calm, like someone who had already survived too much to be shaken by his anger. She moved with quiet precision, checking his pulse, adjusting the blinds. Afternoon light spilled across the bed and caught on a small vase of lavender she carried. The flowers were dry, pale gray, but their scent still lingered soft, persistent. He frowned. "That's unnecessary." "Oh, I know," she replied. "It helps me breathe." He didn't respond, but his expression darkened. She placed the lavender by the window anyway, letting the scent mix with the antiseptic air. When she left, the room felt smaller, the hum of the machines louder. He stared at the lavender for a long time, dry, fragile, refusing to die. Outside, the city lights blinked through the window, steady and distant. Inside, Alexander turned away from the flowers and closed his eyes. He told himself it was irritation that kept him awake that night, nothing more. Morning light poured through the blinds, pale and cold. The lavender by the window had lost more petals overnight, its scent fading into the sharp, sterile air. Emma entered with her usual calm. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes." He didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the monitor's green line, the only heartbeat he could control. She checked his IV, adjusted his blanket, and smiled softly. "Did you sleep?" "I didn't hire you to ask questions," he said. "You didn't hire me at all," she replied gently. "But I'll take that as a no." Her tone wasn't mocking. It was matter of fact, kind in a way that irritated him. He turned away, jaw tightening. Every time she moved, the faint scent of lavender followed. It unsettled him because it reminded him of his wife's perfume, the one he'd thrown away years ago and still smelled in his dreams. By noon, his frustration was restless. When she came to give him his medication, he snapped. "Do you ever stop hovering?" "Only when people start breathing on their own," she said, handing him the glass of water. He took it, his fingers brushing hers briefly. The touch burned too human, too real. He set the glass down too hard, spilling some across the tray. "Careless," he muttered. She wiped it without complaint. "It's just water. It can be cleaned." "Ah blanc." He stared at her, searching for guilt, for something that proved she carried the same burden he did. But her face stayed calm, almost peaceful. "How can you be so calm?" he asked, his voice rough. "You work in a place where people die every day." She met his gaze for the first time. "Because I also see them live. That's what keeps me breathing." He looked away. Her words cut too close. That evening, he overheard her humming while writing notes by his bed. The melody was low, almost like a prayer. It reminded him of the sound his wife used to make when she thought he was asleep, soft, barely there. He clenched his fists. "Could you stop that noise?" "It's not noise," she said quietly. "It's something to hold on to when silence gets too heavy." He wanted to argue, but something in her tone disarmed him. She wasn't defending herself. She was explaining the only way she knew to survive. The next morning, she arrived early. The blinds were still closed, the air stale. She opened one window slightly. "Rooms need light," she murmured. He said nothing. She set a book on the bedside table. "You don't have to read it. Sometimes words just need to be near people." Later, when she poured his water, sunlight slipped through the blinds and hit the surface of the glass. It shimmered faintly, a tremor of warmth in a cold room. He stared at it without meaning to. The reflection moved across the ceiling like something breathing. When she caught him looking, she smiled, not as a nurse, not as someone trying to heal, but as a person simply sharing the air. "Do you always talk this much?" he asked. "Only when silence starts to hurt," she said softly. "Sometimes people don't need apologies. They just need someone willing to breathe again." He looked at her for a long moment, and for once, didn't reply. The clock ticked. The air between them softened. Outside, dawn broke a little brighter. Inside, the glass of water by his bed caught the morning light still, clear, alive. Days began to stretch quietly between them. The room that once felt like a waiting chamber for ghosts now carried something lighter, an unspoken rhythm that neither of them wanted to name. Emma hummed when she changed his IV, sometimes off-key, sometimes smiling at her own mistakes. Once, when he frowned at her tune, she said, "You can file a complaint, but I don't think music falls under medical misconduct." He almost smiled. Almost. In the afternoons, she told small stories about patients who left flowers when they recovered, about an old man who refused painkillers but cried when she fixed his pillow. She never tried to inspire him. She just let life sound ordinary again. Alexander began to listen. He didn't plan to. Her voice filled the empty air that used to echo only with machines. One morning, when she handed him his medication, their fingers brushed. A brief spark, unexpected. He looked up, and for the first time, her eyes didn't look clinical. They looked human. "Sorry," she murmured. He wanted to say "don't be," but the words caught in his throat. He didn't owe anyone tenderness, and yet he missed it. That afternoon, he noticed she laughed with another patient down the hall. It shouldn't have mattered, but when she returned, he found himself asking, "Do you always talk that much?" "Only with the ones still fighting," she said softly. He turned away before she saw the faint tremor at his mouth. Nights were harder. In his dreams, the lights of the operating room still flashed white, merciless. The beeping of machines blurred into his heartbeat. He saw his wife's face, pale under the mask, and a voice saying, "We did everything we could." He woke drenched in sweat, breath unsteady. The lavender on the table had lost nearly all its color. And then he saw her Emma curled in the chair beside his bed, her head resting on her arm. Her hand still held his wrist, fingers lightly over the pulse line. She must have fallen asleep counting it. For a long moment, he just watched. The faint rise and fall of her breathing, the quiet steadiness of her presence. Something shifted, not sharp, not sudden, like the first crack in a frozen lake. He moved his hand and placed it gently over hers, warm, real. Her lashes fluttered. She startled awake, eyes wide and unsure. He didn't pull back. Neither did she. The silence between them was so thin, it could break with a breath. Then she whispered, barely audible, "Your heart's steady tonight." He swallowed. "Maybe you're just better at listening." Their eyes met. She leaned forward slightly, drawn by something neither could name. He mirrored the motion. The distance closed half an inch. A heartbeat until her breath touched his cheek. Then fear. The same old, familiar fear. He turned away. She froze. He said, almost a whisper, "I can't." Her voice trembled, not from rejection but from recognition. "I know." Emma stood, smoothing her uniform. "Try to rest." He nodded, but didn't move. The silence returned, heavier now, full of what almost happened. When she left, he watched the door close, then looked at the small puddle of moonlight spilling across the floor. Outside, rain from the earlier storm had gathered on the windowsill. A thin beam of light cut through, touching the surface of the water. It shimmered faintly alive, shifting, imperfect. Alexander's pulse matched it, slow and uneven. Not healed, not whole, but moving. The first heartbeat of something he couldn't yet name. Morning drifted in pale and quiet. The lavender by the window had almost turned to dust, yet Emma still trimmed its stem, as if keeping it alive mattered more than beauty itself. Alexander watched her move across the room. There was something steady in her, every motion, gentle, exact, patient. He could almost forget the chaos she stirred inside him. Almost. She set the tray by his bed and began mixing his medication. The soft sound of glass and liquid filled the silence. He turned his head, watching without meaning to. Then he saw it. The cabinet door stood slightly open. Inside, behind rows of bottles and gauze, a small photograph leaned against the wall. A familiar smile froze his breath. His wife. The photo was old, corners worn, edges soft. On the back, in faded ink, someone had written, "The woman who taught me to heal with love." The words blurred before his eyes. For a moment, the world narrowed to a pulse of pain, sharp, sudden, electric. Emma turned, startled by the sound of the cabinet shutting. He had done it too fast, his chest tight, voice rough. "Where did you get that picture?" She blinked. "It was from a patient I once cared for. Years ago." He held her gaze, though his heart was hammering. "What happened to her?" Her voice dropped, fragile. "She didn't make it. I was there at the end." He said nothing, just nodded, as if he hadn't already known. Emma hesitated, fingers trembling against the metal tray. "She changed me," she whispered. She smiled, even when she knew she wouldn't wake again. "I think she forgave everyone long before she left." Alexander looked down, every word cutting deeper. She didn't know. She had no idea who he was, whose husband she was speaking to. The silence pressed on him, heavy and unkind. He wanted to tell her, to say her name, to release them both from the weight of ghosts. But his throat locked. He wasn't ready. He feared the moment she'd realize, feared she'd walk away like everyone else had. That night, rain brushed softly against the window. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender, but underneath it all was memory, old, metallic, familiar. She came to check his vitals, voice low. "You're quiet tonight." He forced a smile that wasn't one. "Just tired." "Oh, of what?" He looked at her, then really looked. The exhaustion beneath her calm, the guilt that never left her eyes. He recognized it because it lived in him too. "Emma," he said slowly, "if you could go back, to the moment you lost someone, and save one more life, would you do anything differently?" Her hands stilled. The rain outside grew louder, filling the pause between them. "I would try again," she said at last. "But sometimes we're not allowed to choose the ending. We just carry it." He nodded, eyes burning. He wanted to tell her she did enough, that his wife hadn't suffered, that it wasn't her fault. But the words stayed caged behind his teeth. She gave him a soft, tired smile. "You should rest. The night's long." She gave him a faint smile. "You should rest. The night's long." But rest never came. The echo of her words and that photograph stayed inside him like a heartbeat he couldn't silence. Rain tapped softly against the window, thin and patient. He turned toward it, breath uneven, eyes stinging. He thought of her guilt, of his own. Two people punished by the same loss, circling the same memory. Outside, the storm calmed. Inside, the air grew still heavy, but softer, as if forgiveness had begun to whisper its way in. The rain returned that evening, soft and slow, tapping against the window like a memory refusing to fade. Alexander sat upright in bed, the room dim, except for the faint blue light spilling from the lamp. Emma was there, as always, quiet, focused, writing notes at the small desk by the window. For days, he had carried the weight of what he knew, the truth pressing against his chest like an old scar aching in bad weather. Tonight, he couldn't hold it any longer. "Emma," he said, voice low. She turned, startled by the sound. "Yes?" He hesitated. The words felt heavier than they should. "There's something I need to tell you." She waited, eyes steady, patient as always. "I know who you are," he said finally. "I remember your name. You were there 3 years ago, the surgery." She froze, her pen slipping from her hand. For a moment, she said nothing. Only the rain filled the space between them. "I see," she whispered. "I blamed you," he continued quietly. "I blamed you, the doctors, the world, anyone but myself. I needed someone to carry what I couldn't bear." His voice trembled. "But it wasn't your fault. It never was." Her throat tightened. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." He looked at her, eyes wet with something that wasn't anger anymore. "I said cruel things. I made you feel small. I wanted you to hurt because I couldn't forgive myself." She took a step closer, shaking her head. "You were grieving. People say things in pain." "No," he said softly. "I was hiding." The lamp flickered, washing the room in a pale glow. His face looked older in that light, but gentler too, like a man finally standing in the wreckage of his own pride. "I don't hate that night anymore," he said, "because it led me here. To you." Emma's breath caught. "To me?" He nodded. "You remind me what kindness looks like when it doesn't expect anything back. You make me want to live again." She looked down, blinking fast, but the tears came anyway. He reached for her hand, slow, uncertain. "If this is what feeling means, I don't want to deny it anymore." Their fingers touched. Her pulse raced beneath his thumb. Fragile, human, alive. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the rain answered, steady against the glass. Then she pulled her hand away. "Alexander," her voice broke. "You're the husband of the woman I couldn't save." He shook his head. "You don't have to." "I can't," she said, stepping back. "You deserve peace, not reminders. I spent 3 years trying to forgive myself for that night. How can I love the man whose loss built my guilt?" He rose slightly, pain tightening his chest. "Because she forgave us both long before she left." She closed her eyes, the tears falling now. "You can't know that." "I do," he said, voice trembling. "Because she loved through everything, and maybe that's what she wanted for us to find life again." Emma turned away, shoulders trembling. "I can't," she whispered. "Not now." "Oh." The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the machines. The rain hit harder, sliding down the window in long silver lines. He didn't stop her when she moved toward the door. He just watched her hand linger on the handle, the weight of everything they couldn't say filling the air. She looked back once, her eyes full of sorrow, and something else, something too tender to name. Then she left. The door closed softly. The lamp flickered again, casting a wash of pale blue over the wall. Alexander sat back, his breath shallow. His heart was open now, wounded, yes, but beating. And in that thin light, it was enough to know that even love unreturned could still mean healing. The morning carried the scent of rain and something unfinished. Emma stood in the doorway, hesitant, as if the light behind her might swallow her whole. Alexander looked up from the bed, surprise flickering through the exhaustion in his face. "I didn't think I'd see you again," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure I should come," she answered. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached into her pocket. "But this isn't mine to keep." She held out an envelope, its paper soft from years, its edges yellowed with time. The handwriting on it was delicate, familiar. A name he hadn't dared to read in 3 years. "Your wife left this," Emma said. "She told the hospital to give it to you only if you returned on your own." For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then his fingers brushed the edge of the letter, tracing the curve of her name. He couldn't speak. Emma's eyes softened. "I don't know what's inside," she whispered. "But she must have loved you very much. Every note she left for the staff was about you, your favorite tea, your music, what calmed you down." Her breath hitched. She was thinking of you until the end. The weight of the envelope pressed against his palm, small but infinite. He looked up at Emma, his voice breaking. "You don't have to carry her pain for me." "I'm not," she said. "I think she wanted me to carry her kindness instead." The words hit him deeper than he expected. He swallowed hard, unable to find a reply. "I should go," she said after a pause. You deserve peace, Alexander. Maybe this letter will help you find it. He stood, slower than before, his hand still trembling around the envelope. And what about you? Emma smiled, faint and breaking. Some people heal by staying, others heal by leaving. He stepped closer. But she was already turning toward the door. I don't want you to go, he whispered. She stopped, shoulders shaking. Neither do I, she said. But if I stay, I'll never forgive myself. And you'll never forgive the past. When the door closed behind her, the room seemed to lose its sound. Only the rain remained, soft against the window pane. Alexander sat back down, staring at the envelope lying in his hands. Her handwriting curved across the paper, gentle, alive, like she was still trying to reach him from somewhere beyond time. He placed it on the table beside him. Sunlight broke through the clouds and touched the seal, turning it into gold. He didn't open it, not yet. Outside, the rain began to fade, leaving behind a faint shimmer of light. Inside, the letter waited quiet, patient like faith itself. Night fell like a hush. The city outside was quiet, only the faint hum of distant traffic bleeding through the hospital glass. Alexander sat alone, the unopened letter resting before him on the table. For hours, he hadn't moved. His fingers brushed the paper's edge again and again, hesitant, reverent. Then, finally, he broke the seal. The sound was small, but it split something inside him. Her handwriting appeared soft, looping, full of grace. He could almost hear her voice again, that calm certainty that used to steady him. My love, if you are reading this, it means life has been cruel, but you have survived it. He stopped breathing for a moment. The room blurred. Please don't spend your days building altars to pain. You gave me love worth a lifetime. You don't owe me your loneliness. His vision wavered as the words swam through tears. If your heart ever finds warmth again, don't turn away. Don't mistake guilt for devotion. The truest way to honor me is to live fully, to love again. So please, may you continue. The sentence broke him open. The pen stroke under continue was trembling, as if written with her last strength. He pressed the letter against his chest. A sob rose, quiet but real, the first sound of grief finally set free. For years, he had held every emotion behind walls of logic and pride. Now, they fell like glass. Tears came without shame, without resistance. He looked up at the window. The city lights outside shimmered through the rain, soft gold over blue. On the glass, his reflection looked different, not the man who blamed the world, but one who finally understood what forgiveness felt like. He whispered into the silence, "Thank you for letting me go." The words trembled in the air, then softened. The glow from the bedside lamp caught the corner of the letter, the light flickering gently across his face, warm, steady, alive. For the first time in years, his chest no longer felt like a tomb. It rose and fell freely, each breath deeper than the one before. Outside, dawn began to edge its way into the night. The world exhaled. And Alexander Hayes, billionaire, widower, lost man, finally breathed again. 2 weeks passed, slow and restless, as if the world had been holding its breath with him. Every morning, Alexander found himself reaching for a second cup of coffee he no longer had reason to pour. Every night, his eyes drifted to the empty chair by the window where she used to sit, humming softly while checking his pulse. He missed her not with desperation, but with an ache that had learned tenderness. The silence she left behind wasn't cruel anymore. It was full of her laughter, her patience, the sound of her voice when she said, "Breathe." He began to understand what his wife had meant. Love was not a promise of forever, but permission to begin again. One evening, unable to bear the stillness, he opened his notebook. For the first time in years, his words didn't come from guilt. They came from gratitude. He wrote about the days Emma had taught him to live gently again, and about the woman who had once told him to continue. Then, with careful hands, he placed 2 letters into a single envelope, the one from his wife and his own. He paused before sealing it, whispering softly to the air, "She gave me permission to live again, and I choose to love." The next morning, the letter was sent, no messenger, no call, just his truth carried by paper and courage. When Emma opened her door to find the envelope waiting, the scent of lavender still lingered faintly on it. Inside, she found his words. "She gave me permission to continue. Now, I want to ask you, may I continue with you?" Her breath caught. Her knees weakened. Behind his message lay the familiar handwriting of his late wife, and her final words, "If your heart finds warmth again, don't turn away, let it stay." Tears blurred the ink as Emma pressed the letter to her chest, whispering, "If that is love, then it never stopped." The next thing she knew, her feet were moving before her mind caught up. Through corridors, across the courtyard, her breath coming in uneven waves. Rain had just ended, the pavement glistening under the pale morning Sunday. When she entered the hospital wing, she saw him standing. No wheelchair, no machines, only a quiet steadiness. He turned as if he had felt her before he saw her. Their eyes met. No words. Only that raw, impossible recognition that something once broken had finally healed. She walked toward him, step by step, until the distance between them vanished. He reached out, his hands open not to claim, but to welcome. "I thought you'd take longer," he said softly, voice trembling between laughter and tears. "I tried," she replied, smiling through the wetness on her cheeks. "But my heart didn't listen." He touched her face with the same reverence he'd once reserved for memory. His thumb brushed away her tears. "You waited long enough for me to live again. And you," she whispered, "taught me that forgiveness is another form of love." Their foreheads met first, a small surrender. Then, slowly, their lips found each other a kiss that trembled not with passion but release. It was the kind of kiss that says we made it. The kind that belongs to souls who had already lost everything once and dared to begin again. The light shifted through the open window, falling across them in ribbons of gold and white. Outside, the trees swayed gently, leaves glimmering like breath. Inside, silence returned, but this time, it was kind. He pulled back just enough to look at her. "Emma," he said, the name soft like prayer. "I thought I had run out of reasons to live." She smiled, tracing his jaw with her fingertips. "Then take mine," she whispered. "We'll share them." He laughed, a sound that startled even him, rich and alive. The echo filled the room, breaking the last of the stillness. They sat together on the edge of the bed, shoulders touching, hands intertwined. The lavender in the vase, once dry, caught the sunlight, a single petal trembling loose and falling between them. Neither spoke for a long time. They didn't need to. The air itself carried the words they had waited too long to say. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that somewhere above it, two people had found the courage to begin again. And when the light flooded the room, it felt as though the world itself had opened its chest and exhaled. For the first time in years, Alexander Hayes didn't feel haunted. He simply felt alive. The afternoon light melted into gold. The ocean breathed softly against the horizon, its rhythm steady, forgiving. Alexander and Emma sat by the open window of his seaside home. The air smelled of salt and lavender. Between them, 2 cups of tea still steamed, small spirals of warmth rising like quiet prayers. For a while, neither spoke. They didn't need to. The silence was no longer heavy, it was gentle, alive. Alexander looked at the light spreading across the floor, soft and flickering through the curtain. "See?" he said, his voice low, tender. "The light was always there. We just had to be brave enough to look at it." Emma smiled, turning toward him. "And brave enough to love," she whispered. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. Their hands met, fitting together like something long meant to return. He exhaled slowly, his chest rising with the peace of a man who had finally stopped fighting the past. "Love didn't save me," he said softly, eyes glimmering with the reflection of the sea. "It just let me love again." The words settled in the air, warm and still. Outside, the tide receded, carrying away the last echoes of their pain. They sat there until the sun slipped lower, painting the room in shades of amber. The steam from their tea lingered, drifting upward before disappearing into the quiet. The light caught on the surface of the floorboards, 2 faint reflections, side by side, breathing together. Alexander leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. He could feel her gaze on him, calm and certain. He smiled. "You were right," he said. "Sometimes healing isn't loud. It's just staying." Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. "Then let's stay." Outside, the ocean shimmered, endless and alive. Inside, their hands remained entwined, 2 steady heartbeats sharing the same rhythm. The world didn't change, it just became gentler. Sometimes, Love doesn't arrive to rescue. It arrives to remind you that life still holds room for tenderness. That forgiveness can sound like laughter again, and peace can taste like warm tea shared in silence. If this story touched your heart, stay for more stories where power learns to love again. Because sometimes, healing begins with a single breath. Thank you for watching. Valen Stories, where power learns to love again.